Good afternoon to our audience. Welcome, distinguished guests, and thank you all for joining the World Broadband Association's 2024 Broadband Development Congress Cape Town here at Africa Tech Festival. My name is Mark Oliver, and I'm Vice President of Consulting at Omdia, which is the research and consulting arm of Informa Tech. Omdia is very proud to be a founder member of the World Broadband Association and also to provide its research, insights, events and media expertise to the ongoing activities of the WBBA. I will be your host throughout the course of this afternoon. And just a reminder, as per the housekeeping slides, headsets for translation are available at the back and at the front of the room today. Please make sure to plug the headset in order to be able to access the translation services. Just thinking about the current broadband connectivity context here in Africa at the moment. Many African countries have faced challenges in investing and developing broadband infrastructure due to cost and price restrictions. But whilst costly and complex, fiber deployment in particular is on the rise across the continent right now. In fact, according to Omdia research, fiber subscriptions grew by 22% year on year to Q2 of this year, driven by increased demand for high-speed, low-latency, and ultra-reliable broadband services. While the data on the slide behind me here forecasts that fixed broadband service revenues will grow 45% from $4.6 billion this year to $6.7 billion in 2029 on the back of increased adoption of broadband services. And there are multiple specific country success stories that we'll be hearing about across the course of this afternoon's Broadband Development Congress, but across the rest of Africa Tech Festival, particularly here in South Africa, in Kenya, and in Egypt. And the regional market has potential for real significant growth over the next 5 years due to growing demand for data and digital services, but also because of the large rural population which remains unconnected. To maximize that potential, innovation, collaboration, and partnerships are going to be critical to drive some of the activities and the benefits that you see on the slide here behind me. It is against that context that the World Broadband Association operates, helping to drive that innovation and collaboration that's required to bring the benefit of broadband to all. The WBBA exists to seek to equalize digital inequalities by promoting advocacy, education, and cooperation across the whole industry ecosystem. And you can see some examples of the kinds of organizations that the World Broadband Association brings together behind me on the slide here. The World Broadband Association has a very large and growing membership here in Africa among its 130 plus global members. And if you're not already a member of the World Broadband Association, please do refer to the QR code on the flyer on your seats. Come to find me or use any of our other membership access points to understand how you can benefit from and contribute to the success of the World Broadband Association. We're grateful to have very important speakers here today delivering keynotes, industry leaders from across the operator, technology, ministerial, and banking spaces. And I'd like to thank all of today's speakers and sponsors, not just for the success of today's event, but also their support and success of the World Broadband Association in general. To officially start today's proceedings, I'd like to welcome on stage today's first keynote speaker, the chairman of the WBBA board, Dr. Li-Zheng Mao.
So, distinguished leaders and guests, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. On behalf of WBBA Board of Directors, I would like to extend our warmest welcome and sincerest gratitude to all of you for joining the WBBA Cape Town Broadband Development Congress. Today, we will discuss how cloud and broadband is reshaping Africa's digital landscape, unlocking new opportunities across the industry and exploring ways drives the development of Africa's ICT industry. As a global organization representing the interest of cloud and broadband industry, WBBA is committed to uniting the global industry chain, promote exchange and knowledge sharing, enhance technical collaboration, and driving high-quality development of the industry. The association upholds the spirit of openness, inclusiveness, and win-win cooperation, brings together to diverse range of industry players, including telecom operators, internet service providers, equipment manufacturers, and software developers and research institutions. We are delighted to see that more than 130 industry stakeholders from over 40 countries have joined us on our journey, including many from African countries. With enthusiastic dedication and active contribution of all the members of WBBA, we have established 7 working groups, including generational roadmap, network technology, environmental sustainability, and artificial intelligence. And we have published more than 15 industry white papers. At the Paris Broadband Development Congress, just concluded last month, the association released an annual flagship report, the Broadband and Cloud Development Index 2024 report. Compared to last year, the scope of these reports has extended from 21 countries to 63, covering 90% of the global GDP and 75% of the world population. Comprehensively assessing the current stage of global cloud and broadband industry development from multiple dimensions, providing important insights and references for industry's development and investment construction. For the first time this year, the association launched the WBBA's Broadband Excellency Awards, open to the global cloud and broadband industry to evaluate achievements, including best practice, technological innovation, and industry cooperation. 5 winning projects were selected from over 100 submissions. By creating benchmarks in various fields and promoting successful cases and experiences, we aim to lead the development and the technology progress of the global cloud and the broadband industry. So this year, WBBA Broadband Development Congress was held successfully in Barcelona, Shanghai, and Paris, effectively promoting exchanges and cooperation among the industry. And today, the BDC has come to Africa for the first time. Africa is rich in natural resources and has a large young population with great potential for developing digital technologies like broadband network, cloud computing, and artificial intelligence. In 2023, the scale of Africa's cloud computing markets accounted for 1.69% of the global total, 3 times increase compared to the previous year. Africa has also proposed its own technology transformation development plan, the Digital Transformation Strategy for Africa 2020 to 2030, aim to improve the quality of life and the digital access of African citizens and promote Africa's full participation in the fourth industrial revolution. On the other hand, it is also crucial to take into account of the development of remote area in Africa. According to data, the average internet access rate in Africa in last year was 77%, and the penetration rate of broadband in Africa is 27%, significantly lower than the world's average, 72%. So nearly 900 million people still not connected to the internet. As you can see from the video showing previously, in China, the utilization of broadband has changed a lot, even for the very small and the remote countrysides. So I think that can be an example for broadband infrastructure to increase the development of rural area, okay, which can be an example for that. So ladies and gentlemen, with the theme broadband and digital transformation in Africa, the Congress aimed to gathering global wisdom to jointly explore the opportunities and the changes facing clouds and broadband in Africa, accelerate the digital transformation, bridge the digital divide and the intelligence divide, and shape the bright digital future for Africa. So finally, I wish this Congress be a complete success. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Li Zhengmao. Dr. Li Zhengmao referenced the research that the World Broadband Association has been doing, the investment guidebooks, the strategy frameworks, the technology roadmaps. You can access all of that research using the QR code in the bottom left of the flyer on your seats. Please do engage with the research. We'd love your feedback and to hear your thoughts on what's been produced this year. It's now our privilege to welcome onto the stage Chief of Cabinet from the Ministry of Posts, Telecom and Communications and Digital Economy in the Republic of Guinea, Unfala Silla.
Ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, esteemed partners, today we gather here to share a vision to unlock the transformative power of connectivity to reshape the future of Africa. BDC Cape Town 2024 is more than just a summit. It is a crossroads where our dreams, challenges, and collective determination converge to build a truly inclusive digital future for all Africans. As Chief of Cabinet of the Ministry of Post, Telecommunication, and Digital Economy of the Republic of Guinea, and on behalf of our Minister, Honorable Rose Paula Prisemu, I extend my sincere gratitude to the World Broadband Association for this invaluable opportunity to showcase our commitment to harnessing digital technologies for economic and social progress. In Guinea, as in many countries across our region, access to digital resources remains a privilege for the few. Our communities, particularly in rural and remote areas, still struggle to access essential services due to the digital divide. Yet, we recognize that the digital economy is not just the infrastructure of tomorrow, but it is a right for every African citizen, a tool for social justice. It is up to us to break down the barriers to connectivity. Africa is a continent brimming with potential, yet our connectivity challenges are huge. Today, nearly 800 million Africans remain unconnected, and in rural areas, the percentage is even more staggering. Moreover, the high cost of internet access keeps it out of reach for many families. Guinea faces similar challenges, but we are determined to overcome them with initiatives that leverages both public and private sector collaboration. Broadband is a powerful driver of economic growth. Studies do show that a 10% increase in broadband penetration can boost GDP by up to 2 to 3%, creating millions of jobs and fueling innovation. In Guinea, projects like our national data center and the launch of our national operator, Guinea Telecom, are testaments to our commitment to fostering sustainable, inclusive growth. On a broader scale, ECOWAS is working to replicate such initiatives to promote collective regional development. Digital connectivity is essential for social inclusion. In Guinea, through the GIGA project, in partnership with UNICEF and ITU, we will soon connect 23 schools, providing students in rural areas access to online educational resources. These initiatives align with other projects such as digital hubs and the Casa Island Mediatek, aim at reducing disparities across people and to access knowledge and digital tools. Moreover, we are actively implementing digital inclusion programs for women and children because the digital divide must not deepen gender inequalities. Access to the internet should be a fundamental right for all, regardless of background. Guinea is making significant strides in developing infrastructure. The GIGA project, the establishment of a Cisco Academy, ongoing feasibility studies for a second seaborne cable, and the upgrade of the metropolitan network of Conakry are just a few examples of the efforts we are doing. Aligned with the African Union's Agenda 2063, our Universal Service Fund is dedicated to bridging the digital divide by channeling resources to underserved communities, ensuring that no one is left behind in this digital era. This commitment is further strengthened by the creation of the National Agency for Universal Telecommunication and Digital Services, ANSUTEN, in 2021, which reflects President Mamadi Doumbouya's vision of a digitally inclusive Guinea. Under his leadership, we are determined to make digital access a right for all, fostering social equity and economic growth in line with Africa's long-term transformational goals. Ladies and gentlemen, we hold the potential to transform Africa through digital innovation. But achieving these goals, and I would like to say it, requires a shared vision and a stronger collaboration, an unwavering commitment to ensure that all our citizens are included in this new digital era. We need strong partnerships, innovative financing models, and steadfast support from our governments and international partners. Together, let us make connectivity a universal right, not a privilege. Let's commit to ensure that every African, regardless of location, has access to opportunities that the digital world provides. We hold in our hands the power to build a digital, inclusive, and prosperous Africa. Let us unite our efforts, share our resources, and work together for an Africa where every citizen, every child, every community has a place in this interconnected world. May our commitment here today mark the beginning of a lasting transformation for future generations. Thank you for your attention and your unwavering dedication to this shared cause. Thank you.
Thank you, Nfali. And it's inspiring to hear about the ministry in Guinea's commitment that it's taking in terms of that leadership and the commitment to the fact that internet access is a right for every citizen, regardless of location, regardless of background. And fascinating to hear about some of the innovative models, the PPP business models, for instance, that the ministry there is sponsoring in order to help achieve that right of internet access for all. It's now my very great pleasure to welcome onto the stage Executive Director, Chairman, and CEO of China Telecom, Ke Ruan.
尊敬的李正茂主席、恩法利希拉主任、罗伯特·普利霍达首席执行官、各位来宾、女士们、先生们，大家下午好！很高兴来到美丽的开普敦，参加 WBBA 云网宽带发展大会非洲峰会，与各位嘉宾共同分享中国电信的一些思考和实践。信息通信业是支撑经济社会发展的战略性、基础性、先导性的行业。这个行业的发展主要由科学技术的发明来推动的。回顾100多年的发展历程，伴随着电报、电话、无线电3大技术的发明和普及，催生了信息通信业。进入新世纪以来，随着移动网络、宽带光网等信息基础设施，特别是网络技术的广泛应用，也为我们通信运营商带来了持续的语音和流量的红利。网络成为运营商发展的基础。同时，随着大数据及行业数字化和业务平台化的迅猛发展，数据成为新的生产要素。云计算凭借着高效的数据处理能力，成为数字信息基础设施不可或缺的技术，得到了前所未有的发展。通信业也迎来了新的发展赛道，云计算成为运营商发展的核心。如今，以人工智能为代表的新型技术正迅速的崛起，以云网融合为核心特征的新型数字信息基础设施正在与 AI 加速融合、交叉赋能。新型数字基础设施正在被 AI 重塑。人工智能代表运营商发展的方向。随着云计算、大数据、人工智能的快速发展，为通信企业打开了新的发展的机会，赋予了新的动能。我们深刻地认识到，唯有紧紧把握科技革命和产业变革的趋势，才能奠定坚实的发展基础，实现可持续的发展。为顺应科技革命和产业变革的趋势，中国电信积极推动从传统的电信运营商向科技型企业全面转型。我们提出网络作为基础，云计算是核心，智能化是方向，致力建设高速泛在、天地一体、云网融合、智能敏捷、绿色低碳、安全可控的新型的数字信息基础设施，以适应并拥抱变革时代的到来。我坚持网为基础。中国电信拥有全球规模最大的 5G SA 的共建共享网络，拥有全球最大的千兆光纤网络，光纤行政村的覆盖率达到了99%以上，千兆光网的世纪端口城镇住宅的负载率也达到了94%，并在积极的建设跨数据中心的 高速传输的网络。我们建设了触达全球的国际网络，布放海缆，国际传输带宽超过100T。作为中国唯一的移动通信运营商，我们在全球率先实现了手机和汽车直连卫星的服务，突破了终端、天地多模、低功耗、小型化等技术的难题，首次获得卫星通信国际电信的码号资源。我们坚持云为核心，中国电信自有品牌天翼云已经成为全球最大的运营商云和中国最大的混合云。我们稳步推进通用能力建设、算力建设，以形成全球2+4+31+X+O 的分布式云资源的布局，一城一池覆盖了280多个城市。我们积极推进智能算力的升级，建设万卡全液冷的智算集群，打造区域的智能算力中心。我们实施量子计算云的建设，打造天研量子计算的云平台。这是全球首个超量融合的云平台。我们构建了熙壤一体化智算平台，实现通智超一体化算力的高效调度，充分满足智算互联的新的要求。我们把握智能化发展的方向，中国电信全面构建语音、语义、视觉和多模态4个领域的大模型体系，研发万亿参数的通用基础大模型，开源千亿参数的通用基础大模型，打造数据底座，为人工智能发展汇聚高质量数据集的数据要素平台。在此基础上，我们对企业的内部推出了网络、研发、安全等10多个内部应用的大模型，对外推出了应急、教育、政务等40多个行业大模型。我们高度关注绿色和安全的发展，针对算力发展带来的高能耗的问题，我们与电力企业进行算力和电力的合作，建成中国首个零碳数据中心。针对数字基础设施面临的安全问题，创新量子技术与通话、云网、平台等业务的融合，打造运营商级的差异化的安全能力。助力数字化转型，我们深入推进了5G 加云加 AI 加应用多要素的融合创新，着力打通科技、产品、产业的循环。我们面向消费市场，持续推进5G 应用终端的升级与创新，将中国电信的新城大模型与 AI 手机、AI 云电脑等终端融合，赋能美好数字生活。我们面向行业领域，积极探索并充分释放5G 和 AI 发展的新的动能，形成了5G 加智慧农业、5G 加智慧工业、5G 加智慧文旅、5G 加智慧教育、5G 加智慧医疗等系列5G 创新应用的新标杆。5G 加智慧农业方面，搭建了智慧大棚、农场等服务平台，提升农业生产计划管理，实现了土地、虫群、小气候等精准的控制，大幅度节水、节肥，降低人工成本。5G 加智慧工厂方面，推动产线智能改造，大幅提高智能加工、物流分拣、视觉质检 等环节的生产效率。非洲面临着巨大的时代发展机遇和技术发展潜力，在共筑新时代全天候的中非命运共同体的时代背景下，我们愿把中国电信的思考和实践带到广袤的非洲，不断弥合数字鸿沟，携手非洲伙伴，共同推动非洲的数字经济的发展。在数字基础设施建设方面，我们在非洲自有的资源，特别是依托合作伙伴的资源，已经形成了环非洲大陆的海缆资源能力和 CTG-NET IP 网络的覆盖能力，有效解决了非洲网络资源瓶颈，推动了当地的数字化进程。在服务智能化发展方面，我们为贝宁医院援助项目提供了端对端的解决方案，提供了跨大洲专业级的图像采集和 AI 人脸特征区别的这种功能，实现了中国与非洲之间的中医远程诊疗的服务。在生态合作方面，我们已与南非电信、埃及电信、埃塞俄比亚电信等多家生态合作伙伴达成合作协议，共同推进1G 的跨境传输、1G 的互联网及车联网、市联网等合作项目，致力于赋能非洲数字经济的发展，实现生态的共赢。全球的数字鸿沟不仅是网络连接的鸿沟和云计算的鸿沟，还包括人工智能的鸿沟。中国电信愿与非洲同仁携手并进，为弥合数字鸿沟、推动数字经济繁荣发展贡献力量。在此，我提3点倡议：一是加大基础设施的建设，以 WBBA 为国际的桥梁和纽带，协助非洲运营商对接产业基金，投资移动通信、数据中心、海陆缆等数字基础设施。这些领域代表了投资的方向，通过共建共享的方式，实现降本节能，促进全球网络的互联互通和绿色发展。二是深化科技交流合作，以 WBBA 为科技和产业融合创新的平台，深化与非洲的高校、科研机构的合作，共同探索云网融合最佳的演进路径，推动云计算、人工智能等技术的落地应用，助力非洲数字化转型。三是加强生态开放共赢，以 WBA 为全球合作的平台，完善与国际组织及非洲运营商的合作机制，加速市联网等融合应用平台的建设，围绕网络优化、矿产开发、智能安防等领域共创行业解决方案，推动非洲融入全球数字经济，并支持非洲企业迈向国际市场，让发展成果惠及各国人民。最后，数据非洲，智慧共赢，让我们一起共创美好的未来。谢谢大家。
Thank you, Keiruan, for those important insights into how China Telecom is accelerating its transformation from telco to techco, but also for those proposals and suggestions as to how China Telecom, but also how the World Broadband Association can act as a bridge to bring some of that innovation, collaboration, and partnership to the operators and the community here in Africa. With more transformation, insights, and success stories, I'd now like to welcome onto the stage the Deputy CEO of Tunisia Telecom, Mr. Norbert Prihoda.
Good afternoon, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It's my 4th year at this amazing event, first time at the World Broadband Association specific forum. And I need to say that every year gets just better and better. And I would like to applaud to Dr. Lee as a chairman, to Martin as a founding managing director, to all distinguished speakers and you in the hall here, and all who are joining us online and who will watch this later, as this is, I think, a defining moment in the history of Africa tech events, and I'm sincerely hoping, and I'm sure that more is to come. And for that purpose, actually, both Martin and I are wearing green ties, because green is not only the natural color, but is also color of progress, and it's opening up, right, for future. What I would like to talk to you about today, after all these inspiring speeches of Mr. Ka and the distinguished speaker from Guinea and Dr. Lee, is a little bit more specific examples that we have deployed through AI in our portfolio company, Tunisia Telecom. We are partners with Tunisian government. I represent Dubai Holding. I have been with Dubai Holding for almost 17 years in different countries, and it has been a privileged journey. But first, before I start the presentation, I just would like to say that last year at the Africa Fiber Forum, the event that was there this morning, and Martin, you spoke there as well, I delivered a vision of connectivity of educational and health institutions in Tunisia. And what I would like to report after 1 year is that we managed to connect with fiber 3,500 schools in Tunisia in 1 year, so which is a bit more than 50%, and 300 hospitals, which is basically 100% of the main hospitals in Tunisian territory. So this is something that we are proud of, but obviously it would not have been possible without support of Tunisian government and international financing partners like African Development Bank and World Bank, and our partners like Huawei and others. So let's dig in. So unlocking premium broadband and how we are using AI. Yesterday I had a chance to participate at Africa Leaders In Forum, which was organized as a side event, and we have discussed in the roundtables different topics, and one of them was AI deployment. And there was a lot of discussion about the governance, the data strategy, and overall view on the building huge cloud and data center to house all the data, etc., which I believe is truly important. What we have done in our portfolio business in Tunisia, we actually went the other way around. We started bottom up, and we said, let's try different use cases one by one in smaller scale, and if they work up, let's scale them and let's bring them up a bit. And I'll talk a bit about that in a second. Not too much about that. Tunisia is a country of about 12 million, so quite small. It's exactly on the opposite side of country. So when you have a Cape of Good Hope here as a southernmost point of African continent, in Tunisia we have the northernmost point of geographical point of Africa, and we have about 160,000 kilometers squared. It is quite a country with some mountains. There's a bit of desert. There is sea, obviously. So it's not so easy when you look at the relief. But obviously there are much more waste and complicated in Africa. So that comes back to the question of digital divide. We have quite high internet population rate between mobile and fixed. It's almost 100%. But what is interesting is that on the fixed broadband, we reached 50%. And actually, when you take mobile replacement fixed technologies, it's about 60%. And this is quite a good indicator. What is still a challenge for us is to make sure that we reach the households that do not have internet today, number one. And number two, that we get them the highest possible speed that makes financial sense for us and makes the operational experience for our customers. And I'll talk a bit later about that. We have about 50,000 optical fibers, 50,000 kilometers, and pretty much all the backhaul is fiberized, if you want. And 4G is pretty much everywhere. The Ministry of Telecoms has just awarded provisional licenses for 5G last week, so it's a fresh news. And Tunisia Telecom is one of the license awardees. And we look into offering not only 5G mobile broadband, but also fixed wireless access to complement with our fiber strategy. We have launched 1 gigabit service last year for our retail customers, and I think this was also a defining moment that we managed to showcase that we are able to come with high speeds to satisfy the demand of B2C and B2B. Now, Slide on the left, everybody knows, right? So when the COVID came, a lot of digitalization happened, and almost, let's say, 60% of the industry has been digitized. But the right chart is basically saying that while everybody was talking about that, it's still only like 40% of companies that believe they're on the right path. And more than 90%, they still believe that they are in some sort of startup exploration phase. Yes, we communicate online, we have our meetings online, but what does it mean? How we can go further? How we can utilize the technology for some specific use cases? We are looking at Tunisia at the journey of customer as our prime, let's say, focus, because that's where our revenue comes from, and that's the purpose of our existence, right? So the customers, obviously, it comes from acquisition, it goes through fault management, the activity through the channels before and after. And one of the things is obviously how can we take off the load from the shops, and how can we make the transactions in a digital way. We don't want to eliminate shops, because we still believe that there is a reason for human interaction. And there are a lot of events where we want people to talk together, right? But if we can simplify the event or the issue for the customer, that's where the app comes forward. The basic app is there. What we are working on now is actually the advancement of this app that at the home, the customer will be able to test their fixed broadband connection. And when the fault happens, they will be able to say, is it my Wi-Fi issue? Is it a mesh issue? Is it the router issue? Or is it something at the network? And that's where the things can get fixed faster. And we don't need to send always the truck rolls, and customer doesn't need to wait for hours or 4 days to get serviced. So that's something that we also look with our premium partners to come with a premium Wi-Fi solution for home. And we believe that's a very important step. Now, this is one of the slides that everybody knows, right? But let me jump straight to the use cases. When we looked at how can we try experimenting with AI in our operations and how to bring it to our processes, we asked basically 3 questions. Number 1, does it improve customer experience? Number 2, can we do it faster and better? And number 3, can we do it more efficient? Can we do it cheaper, right? And it doesn't always necessarily mean that then we need to eliminate human from the chain of commands, right? Yes, we would like to minimize it, but we believe still in value of human interaction. Now, why the time is now? First thing, there is so much data being generated, and this is through fiber, through 5G, which is coming 4G today. And those data are either wasted or they need to be stored and processed somewhere. Yes, you start to use them for billing, you can use them for customer value management, but can you use them for something else? And that was the question we asked ourselves. The second thing is that the networks are so fast now that the latency is very low. You know, we are looking at a couple of milliseconds. And from that perspective, the online real-time interaction is possible. Before, you wanted to decide on something, you put the data from the report, you looked at that, then you decided, then again, you need to pull the report. Today, things can happen in real time. And the availability is there. So there is very little impact on this connection, etc. So main challenge is just look at the blue part on the right side, 800,000 households that are still not served with fixed broadband. The good news, yes, we have 1.1, 1.2 million that are served with fixed broadband, and then another maybe 500,000 with fixed broadband replacement. But we have the challenge of those 800,000. So we are looking at 2 things happening in parallel. Number 1, how do we connect the unconnected households and close the digital divide? And number 2 is how the households that are connected today, how do we up their speed and their experience to match their requirements and to enable their business and their home use. So let me go to specific use case. In the fixed broadband area, we have first looked into how do we know we put fiber in the right place. Sometimes you take a static data and you say like, yes, this is high value area, and we have maybe XDSL there, so let's upgrade it to fiber, let's put the fiber there. There are some obvious cases, fine, but apart of those, so this was our first use case for AI, and we have put in a little database, little cloud that was serving only specific case here, and we have put together data from internal resources, both from mobile and fixed network, and from outside, from the statistics office and from some economical data and from municipality data. And we have looked into the point, okay, for example, when there is somebody using high value phone every day at night between 8 to 12, and it's static, and there is a high mobile data usage, that's probably a high potential customer for fiber, right? So this way we have started, and there are obviously many other elements, this was one of them. This way we started to define our development strategy on fiber. Now the next step, what we would like to do is to take the data back into the model and to say how much of that network deployment we managed to install and how many customers are there, how is their experience, and is that penetration higher than in the typical development area which was done by a man based on the paper, right? And then put it back into the model will learn, and next time, hopefully it will become better. So this is a very specific example. The second point here, as 5G is now on the way, how do we complement fiber with FWA? Where does it make sense to put one technology next to another? So those choices are also evaluated by the model. Obviously, we don't keep it only on the model. We still look back at that, we evaluate this, but it's one of the key use cases. Then obviously we go and we try to take this image of the network and we put it into development case. And then we decide what do we do underground, what do we do in the air through airborne technology, and how do we simplify all the network design and how to make it quick and fast to deliver, because that's the essence, right? Remember the 3 questions, one of them was, can we do it faster and better? The other thing that we have looked into as a little AI use case was a troubleshooting and fault management. In the telecom world, a lot of customers face this issue, right? At the beginning, I spoke about the app, and I spoke about the way of customer being able to troubleshoot on their side, maybe even reset everything, etc. But here, we are looking at the network component and a little bit more on the predictive side. So evaluate the events that lead to potential crash or potential fault, and then prevent those events. It could be weather, it could be even external data like construction that is being announced by municipality, etc. And it could be previous faults in the area, and try to make preventive maintenance. So that's for us quite an important thing, and sometimes even leading to offering selected customers replacement technology for specific time if we cannot avoid that outage. So that's quite an important thing for us. Now, our ideal situation is where we are able to design all this into one database, connect those use cases together, and build a model that can be generative and that can, help us to drive the whole operation going forward. But as I said, we took it bottom up, and we are trying to experiment with the specific cases. And so far, we had some really nice and good examples. So our ultimate objective in the home fiber is to have a premium home experience and a smart home connection, where some of these AI applications we can even transfer to customer. Before I leave you, I have a couple of more cases on the mobile side, and I think they are quite interesting. They are very specific, but I think it's very important to share this together, because we can learn from other operators, and maybe there is something that we can offer as well as our learning. For example, outbound roaming. So the customer leaves the country. Once they're out, fine, right? But it could be too late. You can send them SMS, etc. What we are trying to do, we are identifying customers at the point of departure in the country, be it airport or the port, seaport. And when we have microcells, and when they move through the customs, we can identify them, okay, they are likely to go. And then that's the time where we are sending them either SMS or even more efficient USSD pop-up or the app push message. And that is something which is saying like, hell, we think that you are going to Rome. This is the best offer for you if you are going to this or this country. So we are taking this data, putting them back into the model and trying to understand, does it work? Is this customer really traveling? And are they activating the service or not? Are we doing it right, or can we do something better next time? So training a little bit of the model as well. So location, SIM card, service behavior, etc. Now, this used to be a big headache, right? So, and it will be very similar for 5G. So how do you provision the service? How do you make sure that once the coverage is there, the customers have the right SIM card, if they have a right handset, they also have a right provisioning, and they are not just being there in the 4 or 5G area and they cannot use it because the service is not provisioned correctly. So we run this, before we were running the scripts, and every day we had a report and we're looking at that. Now it's a real time, and we are really trying to collect necessary data. We are looking first based on the consumption criteria, then the SIM card, and then obviously the device. And if they have no 4G connection, if they are running on 3G, aka 5G later, and they would be running on 4G, how can we do this provisioning automatically and quickly? And then putting back the data in the model, when the customer got provisioned, did they really use the service? Did they benefit? How much data they consumed? How much revenue they generated? So this is a very specific example for provisioning. The same thing we are trying to do is looking at where do we put our 5G sites, be it home broadband, or as before, high-speed mobile broadband, or as I spoke about, fixed wireless access. Same thing, collect the right data, look at the topology of the network today, look at the handsets. We have identified very specific users with the high-value handsets, 5G enabled, with the SIM card ready, and you know that you want to bring your sites there and have enough spectrum, enough capacity for those customers to be benefiting from the offers that you put in the market. So what is our vision is to understand the customer behavior, which is a typical marketing thing, but understand it in the real time, be able to monetize the network infrastructure, be able to decide where to put our investments, and try to minimize the faults, try to be really sure that the customer experience is top, and there is a seamless transaction, there is a seamless usage. Obviously, that we invest the money for bringing a positive business case and return to our shareholders. One last slide I would leave you with is that we would like really to come to the point where we build that. I started with the governance, I started with data strategy, I started with AI vision and a dedicated team of a couple of computer scientists. That's where we would like to go. Today, we try to approach it more from the specific use cases, and we learn, and we hope to be able to deliver some of those messages also to other members in the World Broadband Association, and we are very eager to learn from all of you to see how we can be better. And obviously, we have some other operations besides Tunisia, in Africa, like in Mauritania, in Mediterranean, like in Cyprus, in Malta, and we are trying to experiment in those countries as well. Thank you very much for your time, and I hope to see you next year.
Thank you, Norbert, for taking us through that vision to strategy to use case journey that Tunisia Telecom has been on very successfully. Thank you for sharing those insights with us. We do have a small tweak to the agenda, which you'll have printed in front of you. We'll be hearing from Dr. Sunil Piyaral from OpenServe after the fascinating panel discussion that we'll be seeing next on the agenda. So I'd like to invite the panelists to join me up here on stage. If we can have from the Africa Cyber Defense Forum, William John Baraza, from Gambia Telecom, Lamin Tukara, from MTN Nigeria, Adiwale Suleiman, from Standard Bank, Nina Triantis, from ZTE, Peter Hu, and my Omdia colleague to moderate the panel, Tekla Mbongwe.
Yeah, thank you very much. I would like to thank the organizers of this forum also deal with India, China Telecom and WBBA for inviting us to come and join this course. The demand for high-speed internet, more so the broadband, is at an unprecedented demand. And this is so because of the usage of data every day by individuals, offices, in our healthcare field, in our schools, and so on and so forth. You asked a question about what is the state of broadband in my area, in the Gambia, for instance. I believe it is on a positive trend. It is on a positive trend because of so many developments that we have witnessed over the years from different levels, starting with the last mile connectivity, the middle mile, and the first mile. Let me give you some examples from this. I'll start with the first mile. The first mile, that is the international connectivity, that is brought us by way of in African case, in the Gambian case, which is called Africa Post to Europe. A few years ago, Gambia, particularly Gambia, the company that I work for, we were only using about 7.5 G capacity at the ACE. Now we are about 35%, 35 G, which is a significant growth in terms of internet connectivity, because that demand has been met because of the individual customers at the last mile level, the demand that they are bringing to us to say, I need internet connection, I need internet connection. That is why we are at the level where we are now. Now, if you come to the middle mile, in the Gambia, we have two infrastructures, very important infrastructures. Broadband connectivity, which is the ECOWAS wide area network and MDN. The ECOWAS is a consortium of African countries that came together to build that infrastructure. What it does is, it's laying the foundation, the backbone for the country, where every operator would have the opportunity to tap into it and sell it to their last mile customers. Then we have the MDN, which is a complement to the ECOWAS. So all of these are at a stage where they've been exhausted and we need more. Now, the challenges that we face at the international connectivity level, which is the ACE, we only have one submarine cable. And that submarine cable is like a single point of failure. Should there be a problem within NA, we have issues. One of the things that we did, the company that I work for, Downtown, we went ahead and got some backup solutions. One of them is called Post Gambia 1, and the other one is Post Gambia 2. At any given time in the age, but I think there's still an opportunity, lots and lots of opportunity for investment in second or third submarine cable. We know that currently with the government support, we are working with World Bank to see if we can have another submarine cable. And to have a third or a fourth is not bad. I think we would be able to, be looking out for a partnership to ensure that we have a submarine cable that is different from this one that we currently have.
Thank you very much, Danny. We'll come back actually to the challenges and how to overcome them throughout our discussion. Let's look at beyond just the state of broadband. The factors do you think will shape the African broadband market in the near future, the key drivers? And I think that I can ask this maybe to Nina as a both financial background. Yeah.
Sure, oops. Hello. Thank you. Thank you. Hi, everyone. Over 60% of connectivity to the internet in Africa today is still mobile. But increasingly, we're seeing quite a lot of investment in fiber networks, and including fiber to the home and fiber to the business, which greatly increases bandwidth capacity and broadband penetration. I think the different countries are at different stages of development with respect to both mobile penetration, and you have countries that are still lagging behind and still using 2G on wireless, you know, the DRC as an example. You still have quite a bit to do. There's still quite a bit to do with respect to covering Africa with mobile and next generation mobile. Certainly, we're seeing quite a lot of investment across the board in 4G and selectively in 5G. But also need to see quite a lot more of investment in terrestrial infrastructure. You know, the cables and, okay, in some cases, there isn't enough redundancy even in terms of the subsea cables, but a lot of cable investment, a lot of cables landing into Africa, but the inward infrastructure is still, there's still quite a bit of a deficit there. There's still quite a bit of a deficit taking infrastructure across the border. And so there are, you know, a number of countries where you have seen quite a lot of investment in infrastructure in South Africa and Kenya and East Africa, and increasingly in East Africa. But, you know, other markets are still lagging behind. Even Nigeria, and I'm sure the Wally will cover, when you look at FTTX, you know, is really very far behind, you know, some of the other markets. So what will enable that? Capital, for sure. There's a lot of interest amongst investors to invest in infrastructure. The telcos are investing, other big players are investing. You're seeing, you know, infrastructure funds, you know, the development finance institutions, etc. But I think regulation also will play a role in enabling and creating an environment whereby investors will be happy to invest more and more in infrastructure. We've seen where there's been overbuild. You know, the returns are, you know, in some cases have been poor. And so I think, you know, one will need to see less duplication where fiber is being laid out in the future. Partnerships, more sharing, as we've seen with the tower infrastructure model. And so that, you know, that will be, you know, that will help in improving investment in broadband infrastructure. And finally, handsets, you know, need quite a lot of, you know, quite a lot of Africans are still don't have, you know, even a feature phone, let alone a smartphone. So we are seeing already a fair bit of activity and a number of players that are looking to assemble in Africa and provide financing to consumers of smartphones. So, you know, more consumers can have access to broadband, but still quite a bit to be done there as well.
Thank you, Nina. Those are quite a few factors we think actually will shape the African broadband market in the future. We can note, for instance, investment and also efficient regulation, affordable devices as well. And when you started talking about the consumer, we can also try to also look at the efforts, which efforts are actually put into in order to improve digital inclusion, address affordability and digital literacy issues, so that connectivity translates to meaningful usage across the continent. I don't know who can help us with that. And we're thinking of William.
Thank you, Tekla, and thank you, China Telecom, WBDA, for inviting us here. Thank you for the question. I think as I address that question, it's important to look at what are the drivers of digital inclusion. And you find that if you go back as an African continent, one of the challenges we had for a long time is eradication of poverty. And the eradication of poverty is actually driven by, you know, including people in the economic activities. Right now, I won't go back to many stories, but right now we're talking about digital economy. And the digital economy means that we need to transform our economies to be able to utilize technology. When you look at that, the economy of digital transformation, we have digital side, talking about the technology and the transformation, which actually means organization. When you look at the organization, we have various players. We've got the telcos, we've got the regulators, and you have the human beings who actually utilize the services. On the regulatory side, it's very important to ensure that we drive policies that encourage investment in local infrastructure development. I think just talked about power sharing as one of the drivers of improvement of access to communication, because you will have telcos investing less in or putting less money because they are sharing infrastructure. On the utilization of the services, the human beings that are utilizing the services need to be well trained to be able to use the services that are being deployed on the networks. When you look at now the telco infrastructure development, the vendor community, Peter is on the panel. I think it's an encouragement of co-investment in infrastructure development, which is key to ensure that we are able to quickly deploy the services. I think I'll not finish without saying that the issue of affordable devices is very key. And devices we need to have the ability to manufacture the devices in the continent to reduce the cost of access. Because right now, we are talking about 6% to about 40% Africans connected to meaningful broadband. That means you have about 900 million Africans not connected to meaningful broadband. And how do we then include those Africans onto digital economy? That is a massive investment that needs to be carried around. I think when I talked about how many fiber cables we have on the continent, on the East African side, I think about 4 or 5 months ago, we had a whole downtime for about a whole day because we only depend on one route for submarine fiber. Obviously, we lost a lot of pillars because of that outage. We have a possibility of connecting East and Central Africa and up to Kinshasa, for example, to have a land bridge of fiber to provide protection for connectivity on the continent, and that also requires investment. So despite the negative environment that's being created on the continent, it also leads to diversify investments. We need to bring in more people to look at the opportunities that are in Africa to connect the remaining 900 million onto broadband. ITU statistics show that we have about 2 billion unconnected people globally, and 50% of them are actually Africans. So this is an opportunity for all of us to invest in this area so that we can be able to connect and include more people in the digital economy. Thank you.
Thank you, William. Thank you, William. So I just want to continue a bit more with broadband development and challenges. And not only this time from a vendor point of view. I don't know if Peter, you can talk to us about the challenges that persist and how to tackle those challenges in an African context, but you can also give us examples of things that have been done somewhere else.
Okay, so thanks for your questions. Actually, on this side, we just talking about broadband, but we think it's still a simple business. So what's the challenges for this business? The key point is about ROI, that means the return of the investment. I just said about some investment in Africa. I think actually our experience around the globally, the key point is about the ODM part. That means what's the cost of the fiber? Because I just give you some example with that. Even that's in the Europe. The 1 home pass or in Germany is nearly cost around 1,500 euros. It's a huge money for that. But so that will be cost the penetration of the fiber is quite low in Germany. But it will be still a lot of the operators want to invest for that because the ROI is also have the better experience for that. So come back to the Epic. So what's some of the Epic? We saw that even there we have some suffer from the inflation about the currency in some of the countries. But for the FTX, it's still a good business for that because on this side we don't care about inflation for the currency, and we can have some better the investment for the home pass for the OD part. So on this one, and we can see that if the some of the operators will be investment in this part, it will be have the return in the 1 or 2 years. It will be have the more opportunities in the FTX part. So we think that this is my point. It's the key challenges for that is our. Thanks.
Thank you, Peter. We can have as well some view from an operator point of view, thinking of Adewale from MTN Nigeria, in terms of challenges. What are some innovative approaches that you think have been successful in overcoming challenges to connectivity in Africa?
Thank you, and thank you for having me. I must first of all appreciate the WBBA for pulling this together on a more serious note, because if you look at the mission of the organization, is about driving the equality of broadband across the globe, and then taking the benefit of both social and economic opportunity that comes with that. Having said that, it's very imperative to understand what are the major things that causes those challenges. First and foremost, before you even have those opportunities to interconnect, there must be infrastructure in place. You must have the right regulatory framework and policy, okay, that drive connectivity. But when those things are not there, it becomes a huge challenge. Now, in this forum, when we're talking, I listened to Nina talking about financial, investment in that space. Now, if I have to categorize the challenges that comes in the space of, connectivity, deep deficit of infrastructure. In Nigeria, we have huge population of over 240 million people, right? Now, if you look at the opportunity to connect those people, I listened to the China Telecom. He was saying about over 90%, 99% of, the entire population have been covered. In Nigeria, of 240 million, we have effective broadband penetration of less than 50%. Okay, and we have over concentration of connectivity at urban center. Peter was talking about the average cost of right, and every investor, the operator is a representative of the investor. I need to return, back to my shareholders. Now, every investor looking at return on their investment. Now, if the cost of providing that service is so huge, right, the operator is looking at where they can get return to the shareholders. And hence, we have overbuilt in terms of fiber in the urban centers, whereby leaving the underdeveloped and underserved people with huge division. Now, what have we done in terms of managing those challenges? We're fortunate that the government has come up with a policy in Nigeria saying that we must declare the asset of delivering service as national critical asset. Okay, the policy came up just being gazetted that anybody that's found to be, maybe you are causing some vandalization of infrastructure, be it base station, fiber infrastructure, whatever it may be, that have to do with telecommunication or broadband provisioning, is now declared as critical national infrastructure. So that protects that asset. And going forward, this is from policy perspective and regulatory perspective. It becomes a backbone of preventing unwanted outages, okay, onto that, either you call it middleware or backbone infrastructure. Now, if you take it further from there and ask the operator, what has worked in Nigeria is in my own environment, we've done certain things that we call them, active, proactive monitoring of those infrastructure. Now, if you look at the base station today, the barrier to entry has been lowered by FiberCo in terms of sharing those infrastructure. However, what have we done? Because we are the one that manage the customers. The fiber company are looking after, okay, their uptime. And the uptime innovative activity they brought in the rural area, they're able to leverage on solar panels, alternative energy, to be able to keep those base stations up. However, at city center, because of the deficit of infrastructure, in Nigeria, over 70% of those base stations are running on diesel-powered engine. And imagine, because the national grid is not pervasive everywhere, so most of the telecom infrastructure are running off a diesel-powered generator system. Now, you need to keep the diesel up, you need to keep the site running. How do you ensure that you don't have an outage? One of the things we've done is to monitor, leveraging on AI and the connectivity, to monitor diesel level of those generator tanks so that you can refill ahead of outage. Now, even the active components of the telecommunication infrastructure, what are we doing? We are doing proactive monitoring so that before the problem occurs, you have to deploy your engineer to be on site on time when you notice those alarms, as against limiting the outages so that people can benefit from the opportunity of the connectivity. Now, beyond that, because most of this infrastructure, are coming to, you have huge data center infrastructure because of the AI that is outblowing a lot of humongous data that is passing across those fiber and the microwave link. Now, we now have to build a redundant fiber, One location might have, like, we call it 3 degrees, multiple fiber for different route, such that you can ensure uptime all the time. So minimizing those minimizing the outages to those centers, improve service availability so that we can mitigate those challenges facing the connectivity. So I can go on and on, but in particularity to Nigeria scenario, we have to, I give credit to the policy and regulatory framework that has enhanced the claim of, we call it CNI. Beyond that, availability of the spectrum, Unfortunately, we have a multi-tier government in places like Nigeria. I was listening to the chief of staff of the Minister of Post and Telecommunication in the Republic of Guinea earlier. The national government is coming on with policies and processes and regulations. But when you come to sub-regional level, you have a scenario in Nigeria that the minister, honorable minister, has come up with a policy to say you can't charge above X amount of money for right of way, But you have the sub-regional government that is seeing charges of right of way as an opportunity of internal generated revenue. That they are charging premium to allow the operator to come in and dig, right? That is increasing, the barrier to having broadband penetration in those sub-regional area. Even though at the federal level, there is this promulgation that's a plan to say, allow them to, to dig, don't charge above this level, but you have small counties, communities that see the telecommunication as an opportunity for them to make money, all right? And they increase the barrier. So in some cases, we've gone to partner, you now have multiple layer of engagement. Federal government has made a law, but the sub-regional team are saying, no, this is our terrain. So the challenges is engaging at multi-layers, engaging with the local communities and the counties, pulling them in, then of course, advocacy and digital literacy to let them see the benefit. I think the best thing that I've seen that have worked is when everybody see what is in need for them, what is benefiting them, they'll be able to change their mindset and how they see those things. Now, if the people see that you have an opportunity, you have digital literacy to say what you can make out of broadband availability in your community. I'll refer to a particular scenario of digital marketing, e-market. GG is an example of Amazon world of this gentleman had a company where willing for buyer, willing for seller, they meet, and he was able to generate a revenue of over 126 million 5 years ago, I'm talking about, because of the abundant availability of broadband for people that can log online, the comfort of their zone, and be able to order and take those opportunities. But so when people see the opportunity that comes with broadband, they'll be able to, reduce the barrier to causing problems or vandalizing the infrastructure. So there's a lot of advocacy and awareness that needs to be in place across all board, both industry and adjacent industry. Another example is the town planners, the building code and all that. If you're able to get them to understand, they need to ensure that when you are building a house, you make provision for fiber penetration to the homes in terms of creating a riser room, in terms of even ensuring that you can allow, when you are building road, you must ensure that there's a ducting infrastructure in there so that people do not come tomorrow and be digging that road. That lower the barrier to entry and make equality of broadband penetration affordable for everybody. But again, because of the mass divide in Nigeria, there's a lot of concentration in the urban city or like rural area. So that's why the opportunity that abound, people are still concentrating, and that's why you're having overbuild. And how are we mitigating that? Coming up with infrastructure sharing, open access. All right. Ensuring that, for example, there's MTN, there's Airtel, there's other providers. If we already have an existing infrastructure of fiber routes in certain area, If you want to use, we allow you to pass through, but of course, at a cost, right? So if you are building, we don't need to go and repair that building if you're able to have a sharing opportunity. So open access. So to reduce those barriers, and these are some of the things that we've been doing to make, I'm sorry, I'm taking much of the time. I hope that I've made a lot of point here. Thank you.
From the operators as well. Let's move to financing, because it's true actually that we briefly begin and talked about challenges linked to financing. If you can probably, Nina, tell us what you think should an investor consider when financing broadband projects in Africa, because very often actually people think that it's expensive, return on investment, how easy or how quick will it be, and considering all those challenges?
Yeah, I mean, you can't get away from certain macro challenges, which, you know, or political or regulatory, which very often drive or impede investor interest. And I think when international investors look at Africa, even though the digital infrastructure space is a highly sought after space, quite a number look at Africa not offering attractive risk-adjusted returns as compared to other regions. And that, you know, that takes into account, you know, FX volatility, like I said, the general macro environment, etc. However, there is a lot of opportunity, as already has been discussed here. You know, first mover advantage is something that investors would like, where there's opportunity and there's opportunity to invest into digital infrastructure. The competitive environment. So again, you know, we've talked about you know, not having duplication, overbuild, having sharing, etc. So those are you know, those are factors that would aid investment. One also has to see opportunity in potentially consolidating, you know, networks, consolidating companies that, you know, some companies operate in some regions and or other regions, and creating, you know, bigger companies that can then benefit from interest from, you know, from different investors. And we've seen in South Africa, you know, you know, the decision by the, you know, tribunal, right? It doesn't help. And so, you know, so those are some of the, you know, so those are some of the factors. A lot of international investors obviously will say, well, you know, dollar revenues, which are, you know, often not easy to combine, are needed for them to, you know, to enter the continent and to invest on the continent.
Thank you, Nina. Nami, do you have anything to add on to this? Or in terms of investment, how do you think you can attract a stakeholder to invest in your markets in Africa?
Hi. Thank you very much for the question. I think it's very important. Africa as a whole, the landscape is too huge, too large. This with the issue of having many places in remote areas. This is quite impossible or quite challenging. We use the word challenging for investors to come in and invest in the landscape in terms of the broadband connectivity. The other issue there is these investors would have to see what is in there for them, because when somebody is coming with a huge sum of money, our business is not cheap. It's a capital intensive business. So when they come in, they have to see what is in there for them, and also what societal impact the investment that they are going to bring, the product that they are going to come up with, what does that help with the communities? I think these are key issues that they will have to look into to make sure that they come. But I want to just, I mean, throw in this a little bit here. You know, I spoke about the different layers. This first mile, second mile, in terms of broadband wireless deployment. And when you get to the last mile, this is where most of the work is done. This is where you get access to the access layer and the end users. There's a lot of work there, and for us in the Gambia, we're putting a lot of effort in it. The entire country, Gambia, if you look at our broadband penetration, it's about 23%. You know, on the other hand, mobile is about, you will believe it, was about 100 to 150, because a country of about 3 million people, you have about 3 or 4 operators, each of them trying to get customers. And imagine that. So that's why we have got out. With the broadband, especially the fiber connectivity across the country, it is very little. So actually, this is why we are open up to the idea. Recently, I just started to roll out some proposals to see if I can we can have investors to come in to work with us on that last mile. I spoke about 2 very important infrastructures that were rolled out across the country: the ECO1's wide area network, and National Broadband Network. All of these together, it's only about 1,300 kilometers that they cover. Imagine in a country that's about 10,000 square kilometers. So there are a lot of opportunities in there. I just thought maybe to throw this in there. But again, back to the question, you know, the people will have to see what do I have in this before I put the money in there. Thank you.
Thank you, Gilami. So, unfortunately, actually, we are running out of time, and I will have to close the discussion here. But actually, it was quite insightful and had a lot to say about what can be done best in order to improve penetration and development of broadband. There's still a lot to do. But I think there's lower penetration rate is actually part of its strength and most of its potentials. In terms of recommendation, you heard that we need innovation in terms of partnerships, in terms of the way to finance broadband projects. For instance, we also need a lot of efficient or more efficient governmental regulation involvement in order to improve penetration rate, notably, for instance, imposing pre-development of fiber in new construction or making actually fiber-ready buildings, for instance. Thank you very much for your attention, and I want you to give a round of applause for our panelists. Thank you very much.
Well, thanks to Tekla and all of our panelists for that fascinating discussion from across the industry ecosystem. I think a very honest appraisal there of the challenges, but also the opportunities that face us in the broadband industry. I think, you know, if we can create the regulatory conditions, if we can make the right policy decisions, then we can stimulate investment in infrastructure. And if we ally that with, you know, the manufacture and the availability of affordable devices which provide access to meaningful, effective services, then we can drive the digital economy using fixed broadband. I'm delighted now to welcome onto stage WBBA board member and network architecture executive from OpenServe, Dr. Sunil Piyal.
Thank you. Thank you, Mark. Thank you very much for that, Mark, and good afternoon to everyone. I think the swap in the agenda worked in my favor because that interesting panel discussion provided such a good foundation for what I'm going to talk about today. It's such an honor to be able to interact with you at the World Broadband Association's Business Broadband Development Congress, which is one of the first in Africa. And thank you to Martin and the team for putting this together. And for those that flew into the country, you'll find that Africa has such an amazing culture and such an amazing vibrance to it. So, sorry, I forgot my clicker here. And so I'm going to be talking about a few things today. I want to talk about the history of a connected Africa. And I think that's an important thing, that we understand the history behind connectivity in Africa. The panel, the speakers before me really spoke about the broadband penetration in Africa, and I want to highlight that as well. I want to speak about the role of broadband in digital transformation in Africa, and keeping with the theme of digital transformation in this Congress. I'll very quickly highlight some of the broadband demand drivers and the key dimensions in digital development in Africa. And I'll end with the organizations that impact the digital transformation in Africa. There's certain organizations that I believe have a huge impact and can drive digital transformation in Africa. So this is such an amazing place to be hosting the Broadband Development Congress. I put up this picture of the castle, which is actually just outside the ICC. And it's one of the oldest structures existing in Southern Africa. And you might want to ask, why? Why did I put up this? And while I'm discussing the impact of artificial intelligence, the impact of augmented reality, the impact of machine learning on the digital transformation of Africa, I want to take you through some of the history of Africa. So during the 15th and 16th century, Africa served as a safe haven for ships that connected the East to the West, the Dutch East Indian Company. Martin Kreen and I worked on some of those ships. So, and what happened there was that these ships connected the East to the West. It connected the East to the rest of Europe by using Africa, and specifically Cape Town, to refresh, to get water, to get refreshments, and move on. And fast track a few hundred years, and what do we see? We see a very similar picture. We see the African coastline being used as landing stations for fiber. We see fiber all across the African coastline. And the big difference between these two pictures is the one on the left, yeah, both ways. The one on the left is ships that traversed the surface of the ocean, carrying goods to Africa, or carrying goods and bypassing Africa. The one on the right shows data traffic, high-speed, low-latency traffic being carried across the world in submarine cables. So not traversing the surface of the ocean, but carrying it on the surface bed of the ocean. And the sad reality, the sad similarity of both these pictures is on the left, as the ships used the African coastline as a safe haven, it transported the goods from the east to the west and provided very little opportunity for trade in Africa. It provided very little opportunity for development in Africa. And what we see with the picture on the right is exactly the same. And that's why I say it's a sad reality, that we have terabytes of information traversing the submarine cables, landing at the stations in along Africa, and yet we see Africa as one of the most unconnected continents in the world. We heard the administration of Guinea talk about how unconnected Africa is. We had Dr. Li Jiangmao talk about only 27% connectivity in Africa. And that highlights how unconnected Africa is. I think one day when they finish building this bridge, I'll run out of opportunities to pick on it, but but I think it provides good context. We're sitting in Cape Town with an unfinished bridge and we're trying to bridge the digital divide. But more importantly than having all of these undersea cables land on our coastline is understanding the innate need for connectivity in Africa, understanding how connectivity in Africa can change the economies within Africa. And I put up the slide which actually highlights what the panel spoke about, highlights a lot of what everyone else in this morning's discussion was talking about. The lighter areas showing less connectivity, with getting very close to white showing zero connectivity. And as you get darker and get to blue, it shows how connected the world is. And you can see Africa sitting very, very unconnected, sitting on 27 to 30% connectivity. And I'm talking fixed line broadband connectivity. Just graphically showing that if you look at the bottom end of this picture, that is where Africa, West and Central Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa sits in relation to connectivity with the rest of the world. And although this is a data from the World Bank in 2019, a few years later, we still see that huge disconnect between emerging economies and the developed economies. But it's all not dark and gloom. You know, what we see here is the compounded annual growth rate of internet bandwidth in the world. And if you look at Africa, Africa's leading that. It's the highest connectivity growth across all regions. And like the panel was discussing now, is there financing models? Is there opportunities to finance? Is there opportunities to attract investment in Africa? Here's an opportunity of why you should invest in Africa. The highest growth rates per region sitting in Africa. A few quick drivers. What drives broadband in Africa? Number one is consumers. The demand for high-speed, low-latency connectivity, for safer connectivity, and for services across all digital platforms, including payments. The citizens demanding government services, e-services, e-health services, and pushing government to go electronic in all their services. New entrepreneurs, something that this continent really needs is entrepreneurship and getting small, medium, and micro enterprise connected. I want to skip this because I actually want to speak to this last bit quite a bit. You know, OpenServe was one of the founding members of the World Broadband Association. And a few years ago, I think the first meeting, Martin, was about 500 people sitting on a telecon saying, what do we do? How do we get the unconnected connected? And to see that the World Broadband Association is now hosting a broadband development congress in Africa, that shows that their interest in getting the unconnected connected. The SATA, or the Southern African Telecommunications Association, is also a body in Africa driving connectivity. They have a conference every year, generally around April, and it's hosted in different countries in Africa, and they're also playing a pivotal role in getting the continent connected. The African Union's 10-year strategy that started in 2020, the 2020 to 2030 digital transformation strategy by the African Union is also pivotal in getting the connected, unconnected, and getting digital transformation in Africa. Regulatory and government bodies, if there's fiber network operators in the room, they would know how difficult it is to get wayleaves, how difficult it is to trench, how difficult it is to get through municipalities and provide fiber reticulation. And I think they also play a very pivotal role in getting the fiber out into the countries in Africa. Last and not least is network infrastructure providers. You know, the role that they play when it comes to attracting investment, the investment that they make, the capital investment in getting out fiber to the countries. I mean, we're sitting in South Africa with about 50% connectivity, but as you go deeper into Africa and get into the inland, you see we're starting to reduce to about 20 to 30% connectivity. And that is my short brief on the history of connectivity in Africa. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sunil, for the fascinating historical context, but also those important insights into the drivers of broadband demand locally. And I do wonder at what point pictures of the unfinished bridge are going to start being used for promoting tourism to Cape Town. I'd now like to welcome to the stage the CEO of Yangtze Optica Africa, Peter Vilhoen.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate to be here. I'm actually standing in for the CEO and president of Yangtze Optical Fiber and Cable Joint Stock Company, Mr. Dr. Zhuang Dan. I'm the CEO of Yangtze Optics Africa Holding and Yangtze Optics Africa Cable. And I think from a vendor perspective, I'm going to show a little bit of a different view of how we can stimulate investment in Africa and thereby sort of bridging this digital divide. I have to apologize that the presentation I'm going to share is it's a bit of a marketing spiel. As I said, I did not necessarily draw up everything. Sorry. Okay. So I do apologize to that, but I think towards the end of it, what I'm trying to say will make a lot of sense. So just a brief overview of YFC. YFC is an optical fiber and optical fiber cable manufacturer from China. It was established in 1988 as a joint venture between the Post and Telecommunication Division of China as well as Philips Optical Fiber, which then became Draka and then Prismium. YFC is one of the, if not the largest manufacturer of optical fiber globally currently, and has shifted its focus across a broad range of different industries and markets as well. To put in context the scale of operation, YFC having manufactured or mastered 3 independent manufacturing technologies has produced in the 35 or 36 odd years around 1 billion fiber kilometers. So that's from the Earth to the Sun about 6 times, and that's quite significant. It has maintained a global industry leader position for the past decade, both in fiber as well as cable manufacturing. And how it's done that, and it is something that we are simply trying to do here in South Africa, is by really looking at how you vertically integrate your value chain. So what YFC has done is it's completely integrated its value chain, both downstream as well as upstream. Downstream in terms of the optical fiber cable or optical fiber they manufacture is looking at consolidating the raw material that they use, manufacturing that self and push that upstream, as well as looking at today from the upstream perspective is not just providing traditional services, but branching out into cloud services, etc., as well, that drives the products that they manufacture and sell. Through this sort of comprehensive integrated value chain model that YFC uses, it has been able to also bake in quality in everything that it does. And in 2018, it actually received the European Quality Award and was only one of 8 global companies that has received this enterprise award for quality throughout the organization itself. Just quickly want to touch upon a couple of innovations brought forward that, not necessarily will bridge the digital divide that we see, but that does add value and does promote and grow our broadband spaces. For instance, we've now introduced new low latency, high capacity, low attenuation fiber. If we look at the data centers where power consumption and data transfer is significantly higher, YFC has also been very much at the forefront of developing OM4 Ultra as well as the new OM5 multi-mode fiber. But I think one of the things that is exceptionally interesting is talking about space division multiplexing fiber. Now, this is a concept for me, somebody that's been in the industry for 25 plus years. This was science fiction when I started in this industry. And this is really where we're starting to use multi-core fibers. So a typical fiber that we use in broadband or long-haul trunk networks today only has a single core fiber. However, we can now manufacture fiber with multiple cores, 4 up to 7 cores, within a single cladded fiber that we know today. This can significantly enhance data transfer and data transfer as well as reduce your cost per bit by using less actual space that is required. So less construction, less civil works. Coupled to all of that, obviously, this is a wide range of cable products from submarine cable that connect continents to customer user interface experience cable, like, for instance, 8K HDMI cable. Going to skip around this. From a global footprint, and this is really, I think, from a vendor perspective where things becomes very interesting. YFC's got a very diverse global footprint, but not just in sales and trade, as well as manufacturing. So in Africa, the journey in Africa actually started around about 2014 with going into 2015, where the People's Republic of China started the initiative of the Road and Belt that has reestablished the Silk Route. And looking at Africa and developing businesses in Africa was very high on that list as well. So if we look at from a broadband perspective, YFC is in cooperation and partnership with a number of African telecom operators across the continent, but more specifically in Southern Africa, in South Africa in 2016, YFC made a significant investment. It was the first investment in a manufacturing operation outside of mainland China that YFC made in cable manufacturing. So what we've created is a completely highly localized optical fiber cable manufacturing facility down in Durban. That was established in 2016. And since then, it's served both the South African, Southern Africa, and Sub-Saharan African markets. Since 2017, we have delivered about 6 million fiber kilometers of optical fiber in about 150,000 fiber kilometers of cable. And again, that's across Southern Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa, right up to the DRC. The investment was significant. In actual fact, we've made a second investment now in 2024 that will come online in 2025. But we have touched approximately 120 million people in Sub-Saharan Africa through products that we've manufactured. But over and above that is, if we look at the investment that we've done in people and upskilling of people, we have created both on a plant level, upskilling, but also within our industry. We are working with the fiber network owners. We are working with the installers. We have been instrumental in helping the provision of optical fiber cable networks in low living standard areas where the return on investment is significantly tougher. And therefore, from an infrastructure perspective, you have to look at ways of reducing that initial cost of investment. And the only way you can do that is having vendors localized in regions that can form a partnership between both the telco operator, the downstream suppliers of infrastructure, as well as, on your manufacturing base. I think, from that perspective, what YFC is looking at is, to say we continue the investment here in Southern Africa, but taking in consideration the challenges that we see in Sub-Saharan Africa is to take this investment and this investment model to a new location within Africa. And hopefully we will be able to achieve the same successes in those areas as well. Thank you very much. Have a lovely day. Thanks.
Thank you, Peter. Following on from a couple of nuggets that Peter shared there, but also one of the main themes across the whole of Africa Tech Festival this week, looking at financing models and monetization strategies. I'm delighted to invite our next speaker onto the stage, the head of cloud engineering at Standard Bank, Tebogo Moloi.
Afternoon, everyone. My name is Tebogo Moloi. I head up cloud engineering in Standard Bank in the corporate investment banking side of the business. And what I do every day is highly aligned to the topic at hand in the business transformation side of the business, which basically we're looking at modernizing the bank and creating digital products to address all the challenges that we find in the African market. Standard Bank operates in 18 countries on the continent and counting, and we have ambitions of being a fully African bank. So addressing some of these challenges is highly aligned to where we want to go as a business. So I think everyone is fully aware that 50% of the African population is still offline, as the map presents. But I think there's a bigger story to this, which follows this, that research shows that if we increase penetration of broadband by 10%, that would lead to a like 1.5 GDP increase in the continent, and that leads to about 2.5, 2.8 in low developed countries. This is significant because in Africa, we have one of the youngest population, and if we then increase that GDP, that means we create opportunities for where those people can become employed. So as we start having that young people come into working age, we need to be able to create opportunities for them to participate in the economy. And as we know that the digital economy is coming up, we need to create those opportunities for them. So let's look at why networks matter, right? We know if we go from left to right that we need to create digital inclusion, meaning that we are a continent based on the previous speaker where normally people have been left behind. So as part of the next set of infrastructure that we build, we need to ensure that we are intentional about leaving no one behind. Because if you're talking about cashless economies, if you're talking about e-commerce, if you're talking about AI, driverless, those things don't happen without everyone participating in the economy, because everyone's going to need an app or some way to be able to transact. We then need to tackle the second half of this, which is broadband infrastructure. And when we look at broadband, we're talking about everything from 2G to 5G, because I think quality matters. If you want to interact from a consumer basis, 2G, 3G is enough. But if you want to start becoming a net exporter of actual business and participate in that economy, you need 4G and 5G to actually start building an e-commerce store or actually building something that you can actually sell outside. Because without that, you are just going to be consuming content and not necessarily engaging in the conversation. Then it leads us to the last one, whereas in data networks, as we've seen, are the backbone that addresses this. So if you look back to the Gilded Age, the three prominent people that built their businesses then were around oil, rail, and steel, right? And basically what we're talking about here is likened to that. Data is the oil, as we normally say. Broadband infrastructure is the steel, and we're talking about data networks as the rail that then connects and allows easy movement of those data technologies and for people to be able to participate across geographies, continents, and even intra-African trade. So now that we've set that scene, let's start understanding where the challenges are. I think everyone knows that Africa is a very vast continent, but the vastness is not only the challenge, but also the high capital outlay that you need upfront to actually put down in order to create the network. And the other challenge is that because we're also vast, that means there are areas where literally it's not dense enough and does not make financial sense for you to go deploy a network. So how do we address that? We adequately roll out enough infrastructure. Then obviously with any capital outlay, everyone is looking for a return on investment. And the challenge about building any network is that when you actually build it, people do come, but not at the volumes that you expect, and it will take a long time in order for it to realize into actual investment. If you're old enough to have lived through the era of mobile networks as they were being deployed in the early 90s, we all remember that before everyone had a cell phone, people's biggest challenges were, how do you make a call if you don't have a cell phone? And a lot of networks deployed a lot of containers where you could go and make a call to people who had cell phones, and that created demand. And when the economy caught up and people started being able to contribute and have cell phones, then we started seeing those disappear. So we're going to have to look at how we then create that demand in order to address the return on investment cycles. And then obviously the last one is that Africa, as vast as it is, we have 54 countries, right? And all those countries have over 2,000 languages, different regulations. How do we address the regulatory gaps and some of the differences in those countries to ensure that when we deploy these networks, things work as expected across the different geographies in a way that 1, makes commerce possible, 2, makes ease of move of data, and 3, allows us to be able to connect in a way that is quick, efficient, and leaves no one behind. And I think the graph that I have on the right is very telling because as you can see, we have 7.4 billion people with internet, but we only have 1.1 billion people with really high-speed internet, right? So even in the people who currently have access to broadband, there's still an inequality in terms of speed and quality of access. If we then look at that and actually look at some of the countries, you see a lot of African countries prominently highlighted in the countries that are being left out. And we do have other countries elsewhere in the world because this is not a purely African challenge. And I did want to express that to kind of like outline that we are not the only people grappling with it. So that means whatever advancements that we find from other geographies, we can also import those to address the challenges that we have. So now that we've outlined kind of like where we are, what the challenges are, I think it's important to always look at how people normally who find themselves in challenging circumstances come up with solutions that are unique to them. So if you then look at the first case study that I looked at, telcos that were struggling to actually deploy infrastructure in rural areas, these are less dense areas, needed to find a model that allowed them to deploy this infrastructure in a way that, 1, it was cheap to deploy, 2, it was easy to operate. So maintenance after the fact that you've deployed it, if there's vandalism, how do you resolve that? And 3, it was easy to service after the fact. So the solution that they came up with is that the telcos in Kenya started collaborating and sharing infrastructure, meaning they would put together money to deploy towers, and they would share the responsibility of looking after those towers amongst themselves. That reduced the cost of deploying the towers, but more importantly, it addressed the second part, which is that quality of access, right? It's not about deploying 2G and 3G networks. It's about deploying 4G, 5G if you can. So it's about deploying quality networks to those people so that they can start contributing in a way that they're not just net consumers, but they're contributors to the economy. So that enabled them to expand their coverage by 30%, but also dropped infrastructure cost, which then they could push those to the actual consumer, making data cheaper. Second case study is, we look at MTN. MTN operates, it's a big player in the African continent, but they looked at how do they use the data that they have running through these networks to create additional revenue streams that will enable them to deploy this network wider. So they partnered with various partners such as OTT services, Showmax from MultiChoice, and a lot of other people. And from the 2022 results, they saw a 32.2% increase in data revenue. So that's a new revenue stream minus voice. And with voice declining, that means that the infrastructure that they've deployed before does not have to go to waste. And also saw the number of data users increase in that market, while digital services that are new revenue started growing on the service as well. So these are 2 use cases in which you can effectively look at how to finance infrastructure to provide services to everyone equally, because as we've seen, if you give people access to the internet, they will find unique and inventive ways to then build. That's outside of giving people access to the internet to use things like AI and all these new tools that are emerging, like cloud, so that they can actually become net contributors to the economy and actually build things like e-commerce stores to sell African products and sell other additional things that could actually bring income into their economy, so that those regions that are less dispersed don't see a net migration of people leaving those regions and going to urban areas to access economic opportunities. So with that said, I think it's important to always look at the next frontier. And what we've seen is that with new revenues coming up, there's ways to accelerate investment. right? So if we then look on the right, we know we've got digital services that are coming online, that partners and people who are not actually deploying networks are coming online to help networks to kind of like deploy services to create demand for their networks, which makes those networks incredibly useful and get a return on investment much quicker. Those are helping, and in this case of MTN, it shows that you can actually enable this much quicker. If you look at IoT, that means in regions such as where mines operate, you can start getting data from those mines to help OEM manufacturers to actually troubleshoot the equipment remotely, and then by so doing reduce costs. There's also data monetization around ensuring that you create monetizing opportunities by using the data of users and how the network is being used to provide targeted use cases for your users to drive actual commerce. You can look at TikTok, Temu, and Shein. That is an organic way in which people on the African continent are now ordering direct from consumer. And we have emerging trends. So AI is a big topic, and we know that broadband by itself is not going to solve it for Africa. We also need other infrastructure, such as energy, to also solve that challenge.
For those very important insights. I think that innovate with purpose comment's a really important one to close that presentation on. I think back to Tunisia Telecom earlier on, talking to us about the fact that their approach when they were looking at their AI strategy was to go from vision to strategy to use case to ensure that they were innovating with purpose. I think that's a really important reminder for us all. And I think there is also a very important discussion here around, quality of connectivity. It's no longer enough to measure the connected versus the underconnected with regards to whether they have access or not. It's about quality of access, which really drives the ability to benefit from and contribute to the digital economy. We're going to move to our final important keynote speaker now. So I'd like to invite onto the stage Vice President and CMO of the Optical Business Line from Huawei, Mr. Kim Jin.
Thank you, Mark. And good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I just review my slides quickly. Okay. Okay. I'm Kim from Huawei. I will share you with this topic as to accelerate fiber broadband development for new business growth. Okay. As we know, the global optical industry is developing very quickly, and up to now, Giga user is over 210 million, and average broadband packet rate has been improved by 100 times in the past 10 years. Global FTTR users is over 30 million and increasing by 10 million every year. Optical transmission network is entered to 400G era, and over 210 networks have upgraded to the 400G globally. Okay, for the fiber broadband, I think is a very, very important engine for the digital economic and carriers business development. And fiber broadband coverage and bandwidth increase and can bring both GDP and telecom revenue growth. This is some data is from Omidyar, and you can see for the fiber broadband penetration and bandwidth upgrade and GDP and carriers revenues will increase. Okay, and in addition, we can see over 70 countries and regions release the fiber broadband policy. And these policies may be, it's not just the release directly to gigabit strategy, and from fiber deployment to 1,000 megabits, and then recently maybe upgraded to 10,000 megabits, such as China, Europe, and South Africa. And this strategy can push the GDP and carrier revenue increase very quickly. So this I think is very, very interesting slides because we know for the Africa market, fiber broadband market, the fiber broadband penetration just only it's only 70.3%, and the median fiber broadband bandwidth speed is just 170 million megabits by 2030. This is, I think, this is also is a great potential market for the Africa fiber broadband. How to seize this great opportunity? This slides and shows very, very interesting some data. We can see higher fiber broadband penetration rate and bandwidth. It means larger. It's a larger market space. How to enlarge the market space? I think we need to seize 3 monetization modes for the 3 dividends, including coverage modernization and for the demography dividend, and bandwidth modernization for traffic dividend and in the future, and experience monetization for the digital dividends. How to support carriers to seize these 3 monetization modes, while we have some innovative solutions to support this situation for the carrier market. First, we can see for the coverage modernization, the key point, I think, is for the fiber deployment is low cost and efficiency. How to reduce the cost and to improve efficiency is a challenge for the carriers. While we have the end-to-end fiber deployment solutions for this situation, firstly, we can use the DQ ODN. DQ means digital quick ODN. Digital means we can use this ODN to visible in NMS system and for the dumb resource, and for the quick ODN, it means is pre-connection can be free of splicing, and in addition, our scenario RPON is can enable faster ORT deployment. For example, it believes the ORT can installed with basement station and to reuse the fiber source for the mobile operators. We use this solution to support Sanfrecom to deploy their fiber resource and to improvement the to reduce the cost per home pass from $200 to $100 and decrease TTM for the fiber deployment from 1 month to 1 week. The next is about bandwidth modernization. This, as we know, less than 50 megabits fiber broadband package is quite common. in African market. Actually, the value of fiber is not fully unleashed. Maybe today everyone knows the satellite broadband services. These services, the bandwidth is up to more than 200 megabits. So we just suggest to compete with fiber broadband to upgrade the bandwidth more than 200 megabits for the carriers. So Huawei FDD FlexPON Plus can support smooth evolution from GPON to 10G-PON, and with minimum investment, we can support up to 1,000 megabits access. This solution help this carrier from Malaysia and launched the 2,000 megabits packet and achieve 20% up improvement. The last one is about experience monetization. FDDR is the best home networking solution. FDDR can guarantee Wi-Fi experience for anybody, anywhere, and anytime. Huawei is accelerating FDDR plus X innovation with storage, computing, Wi-Fi sensing, and smart home control. This case is from China Unicom Hebei, just released the FDDR plus storage package for the fiber broadband users. This new application developed more than 300 new users per day. Our target is helping home connection moving from one fiber to one network, finally build one smart home. With these three modernization modes, maybe the traffic in the network is increased very quickly. So we suggest to build a future-proof converged transport network. This network including two parts. The first, the FMC all-optical metro network, and the 3D mesh backbone network, and including 4 key upgrades. The first one is OT to CO to carry FMC services, including 2B, 2C, and 2H services, and reduce capex. And also use the OXC to replace end-to-end ROADM solution to improve TTM from weeks to days. And we also propose 400G and 800G to reduce the cost per bit. And hybrid EDON can improve the network availability to reach 6 nines. Finally, Africa is the origin of humankind, Asian but also young, fully whole. We believe that the next decade will unleash the golden decade for Africa's digital infrastructure. Huawei is always willing to help African operators implement the network and business innovation to lead the Africa fiber broadband development. We believe through those three monetization modes I shared about, new and year user, higher ARPU, and revenue increase from new service can all be achieved. Let's work together, close and embrace our branding future. Thank you. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Kim, and thank you to all of today's speakers and panelists at the 2024 WBBA Broadband Development Congress, Cape Town. I'd just like to share just a final reminder for you to access and engage with the WBBA's content, many of the talking points that you've heard today via the QR codes on the flyers that are around the auditorium this afternoon. I'd now like to welcome on stage for his closing remarks before closing today's event, the Director General of the World Broadband Association, Mr. Martin Kriener.
Many thanks to everyone who has managed to attend through what I found was an absolutely excellent event. The content and the interesting perspectives that we received from everybody. Just two things I'd like to do. First of all, I do want to, we're going to have a panel session to talk about the latest release from the WBBA on sustainability, in particular how AI impacts global sustainability. And we don't have time for a panel session on that or for an interview on that, but I just want to pick out a number of points. You can see on the screen there, QR code for downloading the latest report. And really it talks about the many different roles that AI is playing in things like network planning, network optimization, network management, in the home network, and picks out examples and case studies for how different companies are making use of AI to enhance their sustainability credentials within the broadband environment. It also highlights what are some of the main issues, and the biggest issue, and won't be a surprise to anyone, is that data availability and the quality of data is key. You can't really make use of AI unless your data quality is sufficiently high. And so the first job within any operator who really wants to make use of AI for any purpose is to clean their data, to gather their data, to make the data available to all of the different parts of the business that want to use it. And it also talks about some of the things that are coming down in the future, autonomous network management, where we're not just talking about optimizing different aspects of a network or optimizing things like network planning and number of truck rolls and so on. We look at a very much self-healing, self-optimizing, self-managing network at different levels of sophistication. So I really would encourage you, if this is a topic that's of interest to you, this is the fourth in a series of papers that the WBBA has developed on the whole topic of sustainability within the broadband world. Let me just move to some of my thoughts about the content we've heard in this event. And it's really been, it's like drinking from a fire hose to a certain extent. I think we had a lot of interesting presentations, and I certainly found myself writing multiple notes on every single one of the presentations. I think obviously Dr. Lee opened up with an overview of the great progress we've made in the WBBA over the last 12 months and the 24 months since our formal formation. Mr. Silya from Guinea talked eloquently about the importance of broadband to drive the GDP and the economies of Africa and of Guinea himself. Mr. Ke, the CEO of China Telecom, then gave us a very interesting and in-depth analysis of how telecoms companies are changing from being the traditional telco to a techco. And whilst many telecoms company might use that phrase from time to time about evolving from a telco to a techco, in China Telecom, as Mr. K mentioned, it's really backed up with incredibly heavy investment in cloud, in AI, and as he mentioned, first time I saw it, in quantum computing, and presumably areas like quantum key encryption and so on. And the level of investment that we're seeing in that, it becomes a real benchmark for how telcos need to evolve from a telco to a techco. He also talked about investments in Africa, and he also outlined a vision for how the WBBA can help Africa. And Norbert from Tunisia Telecom gave us some great examples of broadband deployment using fiber, using AirPON, using other technologies. And he also talked about how AI is a game changer in a whole load of use cases within Tunisia Telecom. Sometimes panel sessions don't get to the heart of the issue, but this panel that we had today, I felt absolutely got to the heart of the issue in terms of what are the challenges that we're facing within this continent in terms of really moving to that next level of broadband. And Mr. Lamin from Gambia talked about challenges in the last mile and the submarine cables. Nina from Standard Bank gave us a really interesting overview of some of the issues that we're facing in terms of the infrastructure deficit, how FTTX is very far behind, and how capital is needed, but capital returns are variable and difficult to predict, and that's always makes investors nervous. And we heard from William from Africa's Cyber Defense talking about digital economy inclusion, and he particularly was the first one to mention training, that putting in place broadband networks is excellent, but you also then need to train people on how to use not just the networks, but how to use the access to content and the services. Peter from ZTE talked about how ROI is actually a big issue for investors, echoing, I think, what Nina said. Adewale from MTN talked about that massive infrastructure deficit and the overbuild that sometimes happens in urban centers, which is a perverse issue, that we're building too much in places in Africa and not building enough in other places. But also we heard the phrase that the low penetration of broadband in Africa is a strength. And it's interesting because the opportunity for coming into this market and investing in this market is excellent because it is, in some respects, such a greenfield market. Peter from YOFC talked about something that I've never heard of in terms of the area of space division multiplexing and all the advances that have been made in fiber technology, which means that we can get orders of magnitude more capacity for the same amount of effort in terms of development. Tobogo Molloy from Standard Bank talked about that much of Africa is still offline, but for every 10% growth in broadband, we're seeing significant growth in GDP, somewhere between 1.5% and 2.5% growth in GDP, and that's hugely important. And then Kim Jin from Huawei finished off with a presentation about where these things are going, some of the incredibly fast progress in terms of optical and fiber technologies, and also outlined 3 key monetization models, different ways of thinking about monetization in the Africa market. So an absolutely fabulous series of presentations touching on many of the interesting aspects on this. Apologies for the power failing before we got to the end, but thank you for managing to bear with us through that. And for those of you in the room who are not members of the World Broadband Association, I would encourage you to consider joining. You can see from everything that's been discussed today that the topics that the WBBA is addressing are the key ones for Africa and for this whole continent. If you are members and haven't accessed all the material, it is all there available for you. Please download material, read it, and get engaged in our many collaboration work groups that Dr. Lee outlined early on. With that, I will draw this event to a close and assure you that this is the first of many events that we will be holding in Africa. And I very much hope to be here next year. Thank you all very much.